Chapter 2: When the Atlantic Ocean was the Sea of Darkness. The earliest seamen were in terror of the deep sea. As they had nothing to guide them, they hugged the shore, always keeping some landmark in sight. Many a ship must have perished upon the lonely waters when perhaps a cruel wind drove it far from land, or when the darkness of night covered the stars by which, later on, they used to steer their course. Sometimes they were glad to see a flock of birds flying inland and to follow them to safety. Then someone discovered the strangely behaving lodestone, which could pick up bits of iron and hold them as if with invisible glue, or it would point always in the same direction if it was left to hang freely from a string. Men experimented with the lodestone, and then some inventive brain thought that as it always pointed in the same direction, if it was left to hang freely from a string, it ought to help a sailor to work out his directions, even in the midst of a wide and unmapped ocean. So the mariner's compass was invented. The early compass was merely a piece of magnetized iron fixed in wood or cork, floating in a bowl of water. We can hardly imagine the courage it must have taken for those early sailors to set out into the dark, unknown seas of the Atlantic with a shaky little compass to guide them. Tales were told that the Atlantic was full of monsters and devils. It was known as the Sea of Darkness. The ships of the 15th century were superior to the earlier ones, with better masts and sails. They were fitted with the mariner's compass, and sailors who made long voyages drew maps or charts of the coasts along which they sailed. The first European sailors to make exploring voyages were the Portuguese, whose country lay on the shores of the Atlantic. They had a good friend in Prince Henry, the youngest son of their king. He had built ships and trained sailors. He invited map makers and men who studied science to settle in Portugal, and he sent his captains to explore the west coast of Africa. At first, many sailors were afraid. Some said that away to the south, the water of the ocean was boiling and the air was full of liquid flames. But Prince Henry laughed at their fears, and year by year, the ships sailed a little farther along the West African coast. These voyages led to the discovery of the Azores, Madeira, and the Canary Islands. The Portuguese set up trading stations along the West African coast and were the first Europeans to capture Africans and carry them back to be sold as slaves. Prince Henry died in 1460, but the work of exploration went on. Portuguese captains hoped to find a way to India, from which came spices, silks, pearls, and other precious cargoes. These things had been brought to the ports of the Eastern Mediterranean until the Turks captured Constantinople and became masters of Eastern Europe. This made trade difficult and dangerous. Before the Portuguese reached India in 1497 by sailing around Africa and eastward, a sea captain set out to find a way to India by sailing westward. He found a vast new continent, but did not live to know it, for he thought he had reached islands off Asia, when in fact he was halfway around the world from there. He showed the way to untold wealth in gold, silver, and many other things, but he got none of his wealth himself, and he died a pauper. His name was Christopher Columbus.